Not every form of aggression is loud or obvious. Some of the most damaging battles between women happen in silence. They show up through subtle digs, quiet jealousy, or hidden rivalry that no one wants to name out loud. It's not the shouting matches that leave the deepest marks. It's the little cuts, the dismissive looks, the backhanded compliments. And this happens more often than people admit. From offices to friendships to social groups, silent aggression weaves itself in, creating tension without a single word being raised. Many women have been conditioned to compete in quiet ways rather than openly. Society has long told us that there's only space for one woman at the top, which fuels this hidden competition. That conditioning shows itself in exclusion, like being left out of a conversation on purpose, or in false praise that carries more venom than support. It appears when achievements are minimized, when comparisons are used to create insecurity, or when support is performed in public but resentment brews in private. What's critical to understand is that these behaviors don't actually come from strength, they come from fear. Fear of being overshadowed, fear of being forgotten, fear that someone else's light might somehow dim their own. Not all battles are fought with raised voices or open confrontation. Some of the most harmful ones happen in silence, through quiet digs, dismissive smiles, or the kind of rivalry that hides behind polite words. It's that subtle tension you feel in a room, the unspoken competition, the looks that say more than any sentence ever could. And here's the truth. This kind of silent aggression is everywhere. It lives in workplaces where colleagues pretend to support you while quietly hoping you fail. It lives in friendships where one person's success makes the other suddenly distant. It even shows up in social circles, where inclusion and exclusion are used like weapons, designed to remind you of your place. This isn't random, it's conditioning. From a young age, women are taught, directly or indirectly, that they're rivals, that there's only room for a select few to shine. And because open confrontation feels unacceptable, it turns into something quieter, something harder to call out. That's why it cuts so deeply. The sarcastic compliment about your appearance, the dismissive shrug at your achievements, the performance of cheering you on while secretly resenting your progress. These things don't come from strength. They come from insecurity, from fear, from the belief that someone else's success somehow threatens your own. Not every act of aggression is loud, visible, or direct. Some of the deepest wounds women carry come from what's unspoken. The silent aggression that lingers in everyday interactions is often more destructive than a heated argument because it's disguised as something else. It hides under polite tones, under smiles, under words that sound like compliments but sting like insults. It shows up in ways that don't immediately register but sit with you long after the moment has passed. This is the kind of rivalry that no one addresses out loud, yet it's powerful enough to shift the way women see themselves and even each other. We've all seen it. The backhanded remark, "You look great for your age." On the surface, it sounds supportive, but underneath, it's a subtle way of putting you in your place, of reminding you that time is catching up. Or maybe it's the moment you're conveniently left out of an invite, excluded from a conversation, or overlooked for recognition, not by mistake, but with intention. Silent aggression rarely announces itself. It doesn't need to. It moves through exclusion, subtle comparison, the quiet undermining of your confidence, the half smile that's more smug than sincere. And this is not random behavior. It's something many women have been conditioned to participate in, often without even realizing it. From an early age, there's a message: compete quietly. Don't be too loud. Don't confront directly, but make sure you win. Society has, for decades, created the illusion that there's limited space for women at the top, that if one of us climbs, another must fall, that another woman's success automatically diminishes our own worth. And because direct competition feels unacceptable or unlikable, it gets channeled into quieter tactics, subtle dismissals, withheld support, and fake encouragement. Think about the times you've witnessed someone downplay another woman's achievements. Instead of celebrating her, the response is, "Oh, that's nice, but anyone could have done that." Or maybe it's phrased as concern, "Are you sure you can handle all that?" when what's really being expressed is doubt, jealousy, or resentment. Silent aggression thrives in these moments because it's easy to mask as harmless conversation. But make no mistake, it's meant to shrink you, to chip away at your confidence without ever appearing hostile. One of the most damaging aspects of silent aggression is how it twists support into performance. Someone may clap for you in public, smile when you share good news, or post congratulations online. But behind closed doors, the truth is different. They resent your progress, they compare themselves against you, and instead of being inspired by your growth, they use it to measure their own insecurities. That's why this behavior is so insidious. It often comes from people you trust, people you expect to stand with you, and when it happens, it leaves you questioning yourself, wondering if you're imagining it because it's never loud enough to feel obvious. The psychology behind it is important to understand. Silent aggression doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fear. It comes from the insecurity of feeling overshadowed, of believing that someone else's shine makes your own dimmer. It's rooted in scarcity, the belief that there isn't enough recognition, validation, or opportunity to go around. When someone feels threatened by your presence, by your success, or even by your confidence, they don't always confront you directly. Instead, they retreat into shadows, using silence and subtlety as weapons. Recognizing this dynamic is essential because once you see it for what it is, it loses much of its power. You begin to understand that those digs, those exclusions, those false smiles aren't actually about you. They're about the other person's internal battle, their fear of being unseen, their struggle with self-worth. When you carry yourself with strength, with dignity, and with self-respect, you naturally become a mirror that reflects back their insecurities. And many people don't know how to handle that. So instead of elevating themselves, they try to quietly pull you down. But here's what you need to remember. Just because it's silent doesn't mean it's harmless. Silent aggression is still aggression. It deserves to be recognized and addressed, not with equal pettiness or retaliation, but with clarity, composure, and firm boundaries. The way you respond to it defines the power it has over you. And when you stop engaging in those hidden rivalries, when you refuse to shrink yourself to ease someone else's insecurity, you take away the only weapon silent aggression has. Not every attack is loud. Some of the most cutting ones arrive in silence. They're not delivered in open conflict, but in subtle gestures, in quiet dismissals, in calculated omissions that sting more than words ever could. This is what makes silent aggression so powerful and at times so destructive. It's the kind of hostility that hides in plain sight, wrapped in politeness, hidden beneath smiles, and because it doesn't look like aggression, it slips under the radar, leaving you questioning yourself, wondering if what you felt was real or if you're just imagining things. That's why it can be so damaging. It thrives on subtlety, on making you doubt your own perception. You see it in backhanded remarks that sound like praise but carry poison. That outfit looks amazing on you. I could never get away with something that bold. It lands like a compliment, but the intention is to remind you that you're different, that you've stepped outside of some invisible line. You see it in exclusion, when you're left out of a conversation, a meeting, a gathering. Not by mistake, but deliberately. It's a power play, a quiet way to say, you don't belong, you're not part of this inner circle. And that silence, that act of being overlooked, can feel sharper than direct confrontation. It doesn't stop there. Silent aggression lives in the way successes are minimized. You achieve something meaningful, and instead of genuine acknowledgement, you're met with indifference or a half-hearted, "Oh, that's nice." Sometimes it's cloaked as concern. Are you sure you're ready for that role? But it's not concern at all. It's doubt disguised as care. It's jealousy wrapped in false empathy. And these tactics, while subtle, are meant to push you off balance, to make you second-guess yourself without giving you a clear reason why. What's important to understand is that this isn't about strength. It's not about confidence. Silent aggression comes from fear. Fear of being overshadowed. Fear of being invisible. Fear that your presence threatens theirs. Many women are conditioned to view one another not as allies, but as competitors. From an early age, society sets up the idea that space for women is limited, that only a few can stand out, and if you rise, someone else must fall. With that belief ingrained, competition becomes the default, but it's rarely expressed directly. Instead, it hides in small slights, in subtle sabotage, in withheld support. Think about how often you've seen people pretend to cheer for someone's success while secretly resenting it. They'll applaud in public, post congratulations online, or flash a smile when you share your good news. But behind closed doors, the reality is different. They measure themselves against you, and instead of using your growth as inspiration, they let it highlight their insecurities. That's the trap silent aggression sets. It creates the illusion of support while planting seeds of division. And because it often comes from people you trust, it leaves you questioning yourself even more deeply. The psychology behind it matters. Silent aggression is rooted in scarcity thinking. The false belief that success is limited, that recognition can only belong to a chosen few, that if you're shining, there's less light left for anyone else. This is why silent aggression feels so persistent. It's not really about you. It's about the other person's battle with themselves, their struggle to reconcile their insecurities with your confidence. And when you carry yourself with presence and self-respect, you naturally stir something in those who are not grounded in their own worth. They don't know how to elevate themselves, so they try to bring you down, quietly, indirectly, but intentionally. But just because it's subtle doesn't mean it should be dismissed. Silent aggression is still aggression. It is still a violation of respect. Recognizing it for what it is allows you to respond differently, not by playing the same game, not by shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort, but by standing in your strength with clarity. And when you do that, you take away the only real power silent aggression has, the ability to make you doubt yourself. Not every battle is fought out in the open. Some of the most painful ones are carried out in silence. They don't come with shouting, confrontation, or raised voices. They come in the form of a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, a compliment that cuts as much as it flatters, or an intentional silence when your name deserves to be mentioned. This is the quiet hostility that often passes unnoticed by others, but is felt deeply by the one who receives it. And the reason it cuts so deeply is because it hides behind a mask of normalcy. On the surface, it can look harmless, but beneath it is an intention to undermine, exclude, or diminish. This silent aggression shows up in many different forms. Sometimes it's the backhanded remark, "You're so confident," almost intimidating. It sounds like praise but carries a subtle sting, meant to frame your strength as a flaw. Other times, it's the deliberate act of leaving someone out of an invitation, a conversation, or a project. Exclusion is a powerful weapon because it doesn't need words. It tells you that you don't belong without ever having to say it. And then there's one of the most common forms, undermining someone's success. You achieve something you've worked hard for, and instead of being celebrated, your achievement is minimized. That's nice, but it's not really that big of a deal. Or, you got lucky. What should have been a moment of pride is quietly chipped away, leaving you questioning if you're truly deserving. These behaviors aren't born from strength. They're rooted in insecurity. Silent aggression almost always comes from fear. Fear of being overshadowed, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing significance in a space where someone else is rising. It's not uncommon because for so long, women have been taught to see one another as competition rather than allies. We've been conditioned to believe that space at the top is scarce, that there's only room for a select few, and that if someone else advances, it automatically lessens our value. When that belief takes root, instead of open rivalry, what emerges is this hidden competition, an unspoken tension that manifests through quiet sabotage rather than honest confrontation. And what makes this so complex is that it often comes from the very people you expect to support you. A colleague, a friend, even someone within your own circle can display these behaviors. To your face, they may smile, clap, or even publicly congratulate you. But behind the scenes, they dismiss your accomplishments, or worse, they pretend they never happened. That duality is what makes silent aggression so draining. You're left doubting your own instincts, wondering if you're imagining the hostility because it's never direct enough to be obvious. Yet, deep down, you know the difference between genuine support and disguised resentment. Understanding the psychology behind this is crucial. Silent aggression is not about you, it's about the person projecting it. Your presence, your confidence, or your achievement reflects back to them the parts of themselves they feel are lacking. Instead of using your success as motivation, they see it as a threat. Instead of celebrating alongside you, they withdraw, resent, or subtly attempt to minimize you so they don't feel as small in comparison. That's why it's so important not to internalize this behavior. The aggression isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a mirror of their fear. But just because it's quiet doesn't mean it should be overlooked. Silent aggression is still aggression. It is still a violation of respect, and if you allow it to go unchecked, it chips away at your confidence over time. Recognizing it for what it is gives you back your power. It allows you to hold your ground without engaging in the same game. And the moment you refuse to let these subtle tactics dictate how you see yourself, you disarm them completely. Not all conflict announces itself. Sometimes the most corrosive battles are fought quietly, hidden beneath layers of politeness and disguised as harmless interactions. Silent aggression is one of the most overlooked dynamics between women, and yet it's one of the most common. It doesn't arrive with open confrontation. It shows up in subtle dismissals, the faintly patronizing remark, the strained smile that hides envy. It's not always loud, but it leaves an impact that is just as heavy. You know it when you feel it, that shift in the air, that sense that beneath the surface of the words spoken, there's another message being delivered. One of the most striking ways this aggression emerges is through constant comparison. Instead of standing side by side, women are too often set up to measure themselves against one another. Who looks younger, who receives more attention, who is achieving more, who seems more admired. Comparison turns into a silent game, one that can feel endless. It shows up when someone listens to your good news but immediately counters with their own, trying to make sure they don't fall behind in the spotlight. It appears when your presence alone is treated as a threat, as though your success somehow diminishes theirs. This comparison game isn't always obvious, but you sense it in conversations that turn competitive rather than supportive. You share an accomplishment, and instead of celebrating with you, the response is to one-up, to redirect the attention back onto themselves. Or maybe it's the subtle undermining that follows. That's nice, but you know who else has done even more? It's the kind of behavior that constantly tries to reframe where you stand, to shift the scale so that no matter how well you're doing, you're still made to feel a step behind. At its core, this behavior doesn't come from a place of power. It comes from insecurity and fear. The fear of being outshined, of not being enough, of losing value if someone else is noticed or praised. Silent aggression thrives when women see one another as opponents in a contest for validation, rather than as allies in growth. Society has fueled this mindset for decades, presenting the illusion that there's only room for one woman at the table, that success is scarce, that attention is limited. When people internalize that belief, they turn life into a competition, constantly scanning where they stand in relation to others instead of focusing on their own lane. The problem with comparison is that it poisons relationships. It turns potential allies into quiet rivals. Instead of building trust, it breeds resentment. Instead of strengthening bonds, it weakens them. And the saddest part is that it doesn't just hurt the target, it also diminishes the one who engages in it. Because every time someone tries to shrink another person to feel bigger, it reveals the smallness they already feel inside. Recognizing this pattern is vital. When you begin to notice the subtle competition, the undermining, the constant attempts to redirect attention, you start to see it for what it really is. Not a reflection of your worth, but a window into someone else's struggle. And once you understand that, you're less likely to take it personally. You stop feeding into the game. You stop allowing their fear to dictate how you see yourself. You realize that their comparison is not about you at all. It's about the battle they're fighting internally. But don't mistake recognition for acceptance. Silent aggression is still aggression, and left unchallenged, it can erode your confidence piece by piece. The antidote is not to retaliate, not to compete back, but to hold steady in your own sense of value. The moment you stop playing the game of comparison, the moment you refuse to let their insecurity push you into doubt, you take back control. That's where your strength lies, in knowing who you are without needing to measure yourself against anyone else. There's a certain kind of hostility that doesn't shout, doesn't confront, and doesn't openly declare itself. Instead, it hides under a mask of friendliness, pretending to be supportive while carrying the weight of resentment beneath the surface. This is one of the most deceptive forms of silent aggression, fake support. It's the applause that feels hollow, the smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, the congratulations that sound more rehearsed than real. On the outside, it looks like encouragement. On the inside, it's envy dressed up as kindness. And the reason it cuts so deeply is because it often comes from people you believed were in your corner. Think about the moments when you've shared good news, something you worked hard for, something that mattered to you. The person across from you smiled, nodded, maybe even clapped, but you could feel it. Their energy was off. Later, you found out they dismissed your accomplishment, minimized it, or even whispered to others that it wasn't as impressive as you thought. That's the reality of fake support. It doesn't confront you directly, it undermines you quietly, creating doubt about whether the people around you genuinely want to see you win. What makes this form of aggression so dangerous is the confusion it creates. Because it isn't direct, you start to question yourself. You wonder, am I imagining this? Maybe they really do support me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. That self-doubt is exactly what silent aggression feeds on. It thrives in ambiguity. It knows how to smile while cutting you down in ways that no one else notices. And when it comes from a colleague, a friend, or even someone in your family, it's even harder to process because trust is already there. You expect them to stand with you, not secretly compete against you. The truth is, fake support isn't about you. It's about them. It's about their inability to handle your success without comparing it to their own lives. Instead of being inspired by what you've achieved, they feel threatened by it. Instead of seeing your win as proof of possibility, they see it as evidence of their own lack. That's why they can't celebrate wholeheartedly, because your growth forces them to look at the parts of themselves they haven't faced yet. But here's what you need to understand. Their reaction is a mirror of their own insecurities, not a reflection of your value. Their inability to genuinely celebrate you doesn't take away from what you've earned. It doesn't lessen your success. It doesn't define your worth. When you internalize their fake support, when you start to question whether you deserve what you have, you hand them power they don't deserve. Silent aggression in the form of false encouragement is especially corrosive because it damages trust. It creates walls where there should be bridges. It keeps women divided when, in truth, our strength is multiplied when we uplift one another. The danger isn't just in the fake clapping. It's in the way it discourages openness. You begin to share less. You begin to withhold your victories. You begin to play smaller so that you don't stir resentment. And that's exactly how silent aggression wins. Not by defeating you directly, but by convincing you to shrink yourself. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to silence yourself for the comfort of others. Fake support may sound like validation, but it is not real. Real support is consistent, steady, and free of envy. Real support claps for you whether the room is full or empty. And when you start to distinguish between the two, you stop confusing fake applause with genuine encouragement. You start to recognize that the energy behind the words matters more than the words themselves. You stop mistaking resentment in disguise for loyalty. And that awareness becomes your protection against the quiet hostility that hides behind a smile. Silent aggression doesn't come from a place of power. It comes from a place of fear. It's easy to look at someone who undermines you, excludes you, or gives those cutting remarks disguised as compliments and think they're strong or calculating. But the truth is, underneath that behavior lies insecurity. It's the fear of being overshadowed, the fear of becoming irrelevant, the fear that another woman's success somehow erases their own. That fear drives the subtle digs, the dismissive looks, the false encouragement. Because if they can chip away at your confidence, even a little, it makes them feel safer in their own skin. This conditioning doesn't appear out of nowhere. For generations, women have been taught that their worth is tied to comparison. Who's prettier, who's younger, who's more admired, who gets chosen. Instead of being encouraged to build together, they're pushed to compete quietly, to fight battles in whispers and subtle gestures. This creates an environment where another woman's win feels like a personal loss, where collaboration feels risky, and where envy replaces genuine celebration. When you begin to understand this psychology, you stop taking it personally. Their silent aggression isn't really about you. It's a reflection of what they feel they lack. Your strength, your presence, your accomplishments act like a mirror. They see themselves through you, and what they can't face in their own lives gets projected onto yours. That's why recognizing the root of this behavior is so important. It allows you to separate your identity from their reaction. It gives you the clarity to see that their resentment is not evidence of your unworthiness, but of their own struggle to accept themselves. And when you see it this way, you're no longer shaken by it. You're anchored in truth. Responding to silent aggression with power rather than drama is one of the most important skills a woman can develop, and yet it is so often overlooked. The instinct, when faced with subtle digs, exclusion, or backhanded compliments, is to react emotionally, to defend yourself, to fight back, to match the energy. But responding with drama only feeds the aggression. It validates it. It allows someone else's insecurity to dictate your behavior, and that is exactly the trap they want you to fall into. True power lies in recognizing the intent behind the action, understanding it for what it is, and choosing a response that reinforces your own strength rather than diminishes it. The first step is to stay calm and composed. When you feel that stab of envy, that veiled insult, or that quiet dismissal, don't react immediately. Pause, breathe, assess the situation without letting emotion override your judgment. The more controlled you are in your response, the less ammunition you provide to the person trying to undermine you. People who engage in silent aggression thrive on emotional reactions. They want to see you rattled, self-conscious, or defensive. When you maintain composure, you remove their leverage. You show that their attempts to destabilize you have no power over your sense of self-worth. Another essential element is setting boundaries. Silent aggression often relies on repetition, the constant backhanded comment, the ongoing exclusion, the persistent undermining. Left unchecked, these behaviors can erode your confidence over time. Boundaries aren't about confrontation for the sake of confrontation. They're about defining what you will and will not accept in your life. This might mean addressing certain behaviors directly with clarity and assertiveness, or it might mean limiting the space that someone occupies in your personal or professional life. The point is to communicate internally or externally that disrespect, even subtle, is not tolerated. Boundaries protect your energy and reinforce your value. Equally important is resisting the temptation to compete back. Silent aggression often triggers a comparison reflex. You feel the need to prove yourself, to outshine, to show that their efforts to diminish you have failed. But responding with competition simply mirrors the same toxic dynamic. It keeps you tied to their insecurity instead of your own trajectory. The more you focus on growth, on improving yourself, on achieving your goals, the more you step out of the arena of silent rivalry. Success, when it comes from alignment with your own path rather than reaction to someone else, is unshakable. Choosing your allies wisely is another form of power. Women who are genuinely supportive become a shield against the quiet hostility of others. Surrounding yourself with people who uplift rather than undermine creates a network of encouragement that offsets the negativity you may encounter. True allies celebrate your wins without envy and hold you accountable without judgment. They don't need to compete with you because they are secure in themselves, and their presence reminds you that not all interactions need to be a battleground. Your circle influences your energy, and consciously curating it is an act of self-preservation. Leading by example is the final piece of responding with power. Silent aggression thrives in an environment of fear and insecurity. When you rise above it, you model a different way of being. You demonstrate that true strength isn't about cutting others down or playing the game of quiet competition. True strength is collaboration, integrity, and poise under pressure. When you carry yourself with dignity, when you respond with calm assertiveness rather than reactive emotion, you set a standard for how women can interact. You show that power does not require aggression, and that influence is earned through self-respect and authenticity, not manipulation. By cultivating calm, setting clear boundaries, refusing to compete unnecessarily, choosing supportive allies, and modeling integrity, you reclaim control over your interactions. The silent aggression of others loses its effect because it can no longer provoke a reaction. You remain grounded in your own strength, and the attempts to destabilize you become irrelevant. Power, in this context, is not about confrontation. It is about maintaining clarity, self-respect, and focus on what truly matters: your growth, your dignity, and your ability to rise above the games that others may try to play in the shadows. The strongest women don't waste their energy fighting each other in silence. They rise above it. True power is not measured by how effectively you can undermine someone else or how loudly you can assert yourself in petty competition. It's measured by your ability to maintain your integrity, to stand firm in your values, and to move through the world with clarity and self-respect. When faced with silent aggression, the instinct might be to react, to defend yourself, to try to expose or confront every subtle attack. But that's exactly what those behaviors are designed to provoke: a response that keeps you entangled in the shadows of someone else's insecurity. Rising above means refusing to play that game, refusing to allow another person's fear or envy to dictate your behavior or shake your confidence. Standing above silent aggression doesn't mean ignoring it either. It means recognizing it for what it is and then responding from a place of strength rather than emotion. It's about acknowledging the subtle digs, the exclusions, the backhanded comments, and understanding that none of these things define your worth. They reflect someone else's struggle, their insecurity, or their misplaced sense of competition. When you internalize this perspective, you strip the aggression of its power. You no longer bend, no longer second-guess yourself, and no longer allow the small, quiet acts of others to influence how you see yourself or how you navigate your path. A woman who rises above silent hostility does so with grace, composure, and a sharp sense of self. She doesn't retaliate with equal measure or engage in petty competition because she understands that true strength comes from self-mastery, not from dragging others down. She sets boundaries without drama, she protects her energy without resentment, and she surrounds herself with allies who genuinely uplift and celebrate her growth. By choosing to focus on her own progress rather than reacting to every slight or subtle attempt at undermining, she creates a life defined by purpose and resilience rather than distraction and envy. Every step taken in calm confidence and measured response reinforces that silent aggression holds no power over her. When others attempt to sow doubt or insecurity through indirect attacks, she stands unwavering, fully aware that their tactics reveal more about them than they do about her. She becomes a model for what it looks like to live beyond the petty dynamics of rivalry, showing that real influence is not about who can hurt whom first. It's about who can maintain dignity, authenticity, and strength, regardless of external pressures. In this way, silent aggression loses its ability to harm because it is no longer acknowledged as a threat. The woman who rises above understands that her presence, her actions, and her achievements speak louder than any covert attempt to diminish her. She lets her consistency, her excellence, and her poise set the tone, demonstrating that power is not about tearing others down, but about uplifting herself, staying true to her vision, and creating an example of integrity and resilience that cannot be shaken. Standing firm in the face of subtle hostility is not easy, but it is essential. It requires self-awareness, discipline, and courage. It requires the understanding that while others may try to compete in shadows, she chooses to shine in her own light. The most formidable women understand that energy is finite. that it must be invested wisely, and that the only person whose approval truly matters is their own. By embracing this mindset, she transforms silent aggression from a potential weapon into a reflection of her own strength, demonstrating unequivocally that real power is about rising above, remaining composed, and letting her presence speak louder than the pettiness that surrounds her.